the man who taught America how to do crime. This is the story of a man who didn't fire guns, didn't shout orders, and didn't hide in back alleys. Instead, he used a quiet mind, a sharp suit, and an understanding of human weakness so deep that it reshaped the criminal world forever. A man who transformed street gangs into corporations, who taught future mob bosses how to think like bankers, who understood that the most powerful weapon in America wasn't violence, but money. His name was Arnold Rothstein. Some called him the Brain, others the Fixer. But history remembers him as the man who modernized organized crime. In this documentary, I will take you from his childhood home in Manhattan, where he grew up under the shadow of a strict, moralistic father, through his teenage years as a compulsive gambler, into his rise as the architect of the Underworld, his role in fixing the 1919 World Series, the empire he built during Prohibition, and finally, the quiet, almost poetic way he met his death, refusing to name his killer, protecting his criminal code to the very end. This is the full life story, start to finish, of the man who taught the American underworld how to think. Early life, the making of a calculated mind. Arnold Rothstein was born on January 17, 1882, on East 43rd Street in Manhattan, into a thriving Jewish-American family. His father, Abraham Rothstein, was known throughout the community as Abe the Just. He was respected, principled, disciplined, and charitable. A man who believed in honesty and honor, qualities his youngest son found uninteresting, even constricting. Young Arnold wasn't like the rest of his family. His older brother Harry was the responsible one, the disciplined son Abraham favored. Arnold, on the other hand, was quiet, calculating, and already obsessed with numbers. While other boys played stickball, he studied probabilities. While others ran through the neighborhood, he sat for hours watching adults gamble in local shops, observing how they behaved when they won and how they crumbled when they lost. His father believed firmly in righteousness, but Arnold saw righteousness as impractical. He once said, "I always knew I'd be a gambler because I loved calculating odds." From childhood, he had the ability to detach emotionally. He didn't get angry when he lost. He didn't get overly excited when he won. This calm neutrality would become his greatest advantage in adulthood. By age 10, he was betting on marbles. By age 13, he was betting on pool games. By 15, he was gambling seriously, already earning more from side bets than most adults made in a week. His father, Abe the Just, worried deeply. He warned Arnold that gambling was a path to ruin. But Arnold wasn't listening. He believed life itself was a gamble, and success belonged to those who understood the rules of risk. So the moral home couldn't contain him. The neighborhood couldn't restrain him. The culture of safety and righteousness his father preached only pushed him further toward the thrill of high-risk profit. By the time he reached adulthood, the conflict between father and son was already too large to repair. Abe the Just would be disgusted by the empire Arnold built, but the son never looked back. Young Rothstein, addicted to numbers, driven by control. As I guide you into his early adult years, you must understand one thing clearly. Arnold Rothstein wasn't addicted to gambling. He was addicted to winning. There's a difference. He didn't chase the emotional high gamblers crave. He chased logic. He chased calculated advantage. He chased the intellectual domination of beating other men at their own game. In his early 20s, he began frequenting pool halls, horse tracks, and private card rooms. Even then, he stood out. He dressed sharply, spoke softly, and watched others carefully. He rarely played hands he couldn't win. His goal wasn't luck, it was control. One of his earliest documented big wins came from a poker game around 1905, where he reportedly walked away with $10,000 in a single night. In today's money, that's roughly $330,000. Imagine a 23-year-old making that much from a card game. Arnold didn't imagine it, he expected it. By his mid-20s, he was known among the city's high-stakes players as someone who never cracked under pressure. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't act impulsively. This discipline made him terrifying at the table. Gamblers lose because they chase emotions. Rothstein won because he removed emotion entirely. By 28, he had turned his talent into a profession. He moved into Manhattan's Tenderloin district, the seediest, most corrupt part of the city, filled with brothels, gambling dens, crooked cops, pickpockets, and political fixer networks. And it was there, in 1910, that he established his first real casino. The Tenderloin Casino, where the empire began. By 1910, Arnold Rothstein was no longer just a gambler. He was a manager of men. The Tenderloin district was the perfect place for a man like him. It was dense with corruption, yet full of opportunity. Criminal enterprises operated openly, protected by bribes paid to police captains and political bosses. The district didn't just tolerate vice, it celebrated it. Rothstein opened a high-stakes casino disguised as a private club. It wasn't flashy or chaotic. It was organized, quiet, efficient. He ran it like a bank. Dealers were trained to be calm. Security was invisible but omnipresent. Cheating was impossible unless he permitted it. Every guest was vetted. Every risk was calculated. The casino made $2,000 to $4,000 per night, depending on activity. Adjusted for modern value, that's $55,000 to $110,000 per night. Per night. Within months, the Tenderloin Casino became one of the most profitable gambling operations in New York. But here's what people often miss when telling his story. He didn't rely only on gambling profits. Rothstein understood diversification long before the Mafia did. He invested his money into real estate, taxi companies, stables and horse racing interests, loan sharking operations, politically connected business ventures, stock market speculation. By 1912, he was regularly lending money to gamblers, politicians, and gang leaders at rates that guaranteed enormous returns. If you owed Rothstein money, you paid. His influence made sure of that. He wasn't violent. He hired men who were. And because he stayed out of the street-level fights, the law rarely pursued him. This independence, and his disciplined financial mind, made him unlike any criminal America had seen before. The Black Sox Scandal, fixing the 1919 World Series. No moment in Arnold Rothstein's life is more infamous than the 1919 World Series fix, often called the Black Sox Scandal. Let me take you through it carefully, because it shows the full brilliance of his mind. In 1919, 8 Chicago White Sox players, poorly paid and bitter, agreed to intentionally lose the World Series in exchange for cash. But small-time gamblers couldn't finance the fix properly. They needed someone with deep pockets, strategic thinking, and absolute control over betting lines. They needed Arnold Rothstein. Through intermediaries, notably Sleepy Bill Burns and Sport Sullivan, Rothstein quietly contributed $80,000 to $100,000 to fund the fix. In today's money, that's $1.3 million to $1.7 million. In return, he placed massive bets on the Cincinnati Reds to win. Reports vary, but many historians estimate he made upward of $350,000 in profit. Adjusted to modern value, that's about $6 million. He didn't attend the games. He didn't communicate with the players directly. He didn't leave fingerprints. When the scandal broke, he testified that he had nothing to do with it. And because no evidence tied him directly, he walked free. This event immortalized him. He wasn't just a gambler anymore. He was the man who proved that entire sports leagues could be manipulated if you controlled enough money. This was the moment the American public realized Arnold Rothstein was operating on a level no one else reached. The empire explodes. When the 18th Amendment outlawed alcohol in 1920, most criminals saw risk. Arnold Rothstein saw a once-in-a-century business opportunity. He became one of the earliest and most effective architects of the Prohibition underworld. But unlike other bootleggers, he didn't personally run trucks or breweries. He structured the alcohol trade like a corporation, smuggling partnerships with Canadian suppliers, distribution networks run by young gang leaders, speakeasies financed through silent ownership, warehouses shielded by political payoffs, payroll systems to ensure loyalty, layered management to distance himself from risk. His network made millions annually. A single shipment could generate $100,000 profit, equivalent to $1.6 million today. And this is where Rothstein's story intersects with the men who would become legends. Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Frank Costello. They were young, ambitious, and willing to learn. Rothstein became their teacher. He taught them never to mix business with unnecessary violence, to launder money through legitimate enterprises, to keep meticulous books, to pay off police, judges, and politicians, to think long-term and quietly. One of the most important aspects of Rothstein's legacy is his mentorship. He wasn't a mob boss in the traditional sense. He didn't command a family. He wasn't Italian or Irish, he sat above ethnic crime groups. What he offered was intellect. Lucky Luciano later said, "Arnold was the best teacher I ever had. He taught me how to dress, how to think, how to do business." He became the intellectual architect behind what would later become the National Crime Syndicate. His protégés learned organization, delegation, financial discipline, the use of lawyers, the importance of political protection, the value of connections over brutality. Through these young men, his influence lasted far beyond his lifetime. He didn't just run an empire. He built the blueprint for every major organized crime structure that would follow. For a man who built an empire on discipline, his fall came from something he never expected: carelessness. By 1928, Rothstein had been gambling heavily on stock speculation. The financial markets were volatile, and even a man like him could not escape the chaos of the late 1920s. In October of that year, during a legendary, days-long poker game, Rothstein lost heavily. He owed approximately $320,000, the equivalent of $5.6 million today. But unlike earlier in his life, when he paid debts to maintain his reputation, this time he refused. He insisted the game had been rigged. Word spread quickly. A man who had always paid his debts now wasn't paying. In the criminal world, reputation was everything. This refusal marked him. On November 4, 1928, Arnold Rothstein was shot at the Park Central Hotel in Manhattan. The bullet tore through his abdomen. He collapsed but remained conscious. Witnesses begged him to identify the shooter. He refused. His final words reflected the code he lived by. "You stick to your trade, I'll stick to mine." Even in his final hours, he protected his world. He died the next day at the age of 46. As I bring this story to its conclusion, it's important to understand what Arnold Rothstein represents. He wasn't just a gambler. He wasn't just a gangster. He wasn't just a fixer. He was the man who transformed illegal enterprises into scalable businesses, taught the mafia how to operate with intelligence, created national networks that lasted decades, influenced Las Vegas through his protégés, reshaped political corruption, introduced modern money laundering, proved that the richest criminals didn't need violence, created systems still used by organized crime today. His death didn't end his empire. It only dethroned its creator. His students took his methods and built the underworld of the 20th century. His strategies evolved into Las Vegas casinos, international drug routes, union corruption, and financial crime structures. And while many gangsters lived loudly, violently, and publicly, Rothstein lived in tailored suits, quiet rooms, private meetings, and calculated decisions. He was the man behind the curtain, the silent organizer, the financial boss of bosses. Arnold Rothstein is remembered today not for brutality, but for brilliance. For better or worse, he was the first person to treat crime like a corporation, and the world of organized crime never looked the same again. As we close this journey into the life of Arnold Rothstein, I'm reminded of something deeper than crime, money, or even legacy. Rothstein didn't just break rules, he rewrote the entire playbook. He shaped Wall Street without stepping onto it, built an empire without holding public office, and influenced the criminal underworld without ever pulling a trigger. His life was proof of how far intellect can take a man, and how far arrogance can bring him crashing down. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about America's rise, that the lines between business and crime, power and corruption, success and destruction, have always been thinner than they appear. If you've stayed with me through this entire investigation, then you're the kind of person who wants the real stories, the raw history, the hidden angles, and the truths most people never hear. And that's exactly what we do here. So before you go, take a moment. If this story gave you something to think about, hit the like button. If you want more deep dives into the criminal minds and hidden empires that shaped the world, subscribe. And if you want the next episode to come faster, drop a comment. Tell me whose story you want next. Your support doesn't just help the channel, it tells me you want more of the history they tried to bury. Until then, thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.